Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here in Northern Virginia, where we're covering the Surface Navy Association's 30th Annual Conference and Trade Show. Our coverage here is sponsored by Leonardo DRS, and we're talking to Tim McCue, who is the Vice President for LCS and Frigate programs at Austal, USA, retired US Navy Commander. Great seeing you. Happy New Year. Start off, the frigate program is obviously one of the big priorities here. Everybody is competing for it. You know, we've got Fincantieri, who is the monohull. You guys are the trimaran hull. Talk to us a little bit about your proposal. What are some of the features that you've incorporated into it? Last year when we spoke at Navy League, you talked a little bit about sort of a preliminary sense of what are some of the things you can do. You guys really have fleshed it out this time. Talk to us about some of the attributes and features that you're trying to present to the Navy to attract them to continue with the LCS design, to have that larger fleet commonality, instead of going to an entirely new design for that sort of second batch that was supposed to be the LCS program.
Sure, so last year we talked about some of the changes that he was proposing for the frigate. Instead of having a ship that could do one mission at a time, they want a multi-mission. This year they defined a little bit better about what they want for local area defense, and we've responded with 2 Mark 41 launchers, one forward 8 cells, one aft 8 cells, strike length. Last year we talked about contributing the space and weight that the LCS offered to those frigate requirements. Again, we're still going through the concept design, working with the Navy to make sure we understand the priorities, but at least that's the biggest change we have this year, local area defense.
And it looks like you guys have a little bit more boat capability?
So it's the same as last year. We had 2 7-meter rib boats on the port side. There hasn't been a big discussion about additional surface-to-surface interfaces. More surface-to-air interfaces is what we're talking about.
And there is a lot of talk about anti-submarine warfare. Talk to us a little bit about also how the water jets affect that calculus, because there are some folks who say, look, water jets are really, really good. There are others who say they're very, very loud. Talk to us about where you fall, and especially on how you guys accommodate sort of a more fulsome ASW suite. Sure.
So we have water jets, obviously, on LCS. We like to keep with that. That's our theme, is to keep the change, keep the amount of NRE required to transition from LCS to a frigate down. So a big decision we have to make is, now that the speed is less, top speed for the frigate right now is 26 knots, is when do we make a transition to a more conventional fixed pitch propeller. There is an underwater signature requirement on this ship now. We meet that today. We don't necessarily have all the information on how a water jet performs in open ocean. We know we do pretty well against other ships in shallow water, but that's something we have to come through with the Navy. Now, we did turn our proposal for concept design just before Christmas. We expect an award for that in the February timeframe, and then we'll spend the next 60 months fleshing out just those ideas. What does the Navy desire? What does the Navy really need for future threats? And then what can they afford?
And would you guys be able to easily accommodate a shift to propeller shafts and conventional propellers from the 4 water jet configuration you currently have?
So as we talked about last time, we have 4 independent shaft lines. We could accommodate a conventional shaft line. It'll be a change. Again, I'm trying to avoid that change, but it's something that we are looking at right now with locals here.
Let me take you to the fact that this is a very, very hot, it's funny, we were talking earlier about it, having covered this since the inception of the program, it's amazing to recognize that at this point there are more than a dozen of the ships that have been completed. Talk to us a little bit about where you guys are on the production cycle, latest delivery, and especially some of the lessons learned from the Coronado deployment that are shaping not only how you're going to be building subsequent ships, but also some of the sustainment model. But let's start first of all with sort of where you guys are in the production cycle and some of the lessons learned from the Coronado deployment.
So we've currently delivered LCS 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, just delivered LCS 12 back in October. We finished acceptance trials in LCS 14 before Christmas. We'll deliver her in February. So we're reaching steady state production. The shipyard is tuned up right now to do 2 ships per year, to do 2 sets of sea trials a year, to do 2 deliveries a year. And that's the key for us, is stability. We learned an awful lot from LCS 6. That was the first ship we did as a prime contractor. So by the time we did LCS 14, we had taken a considerable amount of man hours out of the ship, also reduced the schedule it took to build the ships. And now we're getting to the point where we understand what it takes to build the ships. So we've experienced a pretty good learning curve. as far as LCS 4's deployment, which we think was pretty successful, all Navy indicates that they had a pretty good deployment. They got back late last year into San Diego. A lot of the changes that we have made on LCS 6 and follow were a result of some of the things they learned on 4. And so we're able to put that into the new construction line. And we're seeing that those things have paid off already. Some of the waster sleeves, some of the things we're doing to reduce corrosion are already in the ship. We're learning more lessons that come back from 4 and rolling them right into new construction. So LCS 18 has a different door on it as a result of some of the lessons we learned on 4.
And let me ask you a little bit, there were folks here who, always will make some observation. You have an aluminum ship, an unpainted aluminum ship actually, but talk to us a little bit about what some of the real world corrosion lessons you've learned, because your guys' contention has been, actually it's a much lower maintenance approach than it is with the steel hull. Talk to us about some of from your standpoint, the advantages you guys are seeing in having that all aluminum approach.
So you talk about life cycle cost, you talk about what the drivers are. Fuel is the number one driver. Our ship, because it's made of aluminum, is much lighter. Can go through the water a little smoother than other ships. Number 2 top driver for life cycle maintenance is paint. We don't paint our top side, right? So when you talk about the overall life cycle cost, both of those are off the table. We have experienced some corrosion issues, but we've addressed them. Again, you're going to have bimetallic corrosion with some of the stainless steel combining with aluminum. We've put waster sleeves in other places to reduce corrosion. And as you get further into life cycle, understanding what drives costs, those are the things we're going to attack. We're working closely with BMS 501 to identify those cost drivers and then reduce them to increase ACE of O.
And I'm sure the sailors totally miss the chipping hammer and wire brushes and painting. I'm sure they really, really miss that.
As we discussed last year, there is no topside paint. The flight deck is painted, and they can work the flight deck. But I'm happy to have those guys do real-life operational things instead of chip paint.
Let's talk a little bit about the sustainment model, and I know that that's still sort of a work in progress ultimately. But you guys are also setting up a capability in an office in Singapore. That's going to be a very important Sembawang's a very important forward deployment point for those ships. Talk to us a little bit about what that sustainment model, how it's going to evolve, and what your guys' role is going to be in this sort of evolving LCS sustainment story.
Sure. So as the aluminum experts in this country, we're the biggest manufacturer of aluminum. We see ourselves picking up that role in the through life piece. We have established a pretty big presence in San Diego already. I'm opening office there in April to provide service support to the ships that are home ported in San Diego. Likewise, Singapore. We have an office. We'll be setting up a service center over there when there's enough ships over there to support it. We expect the deployments of LCS 8 and 10 to drive that business to Singapore, and we'll be right there to support them. Again, we know the most about our ships. We know how to maintain them, and we'll be happy to provide that service to the Navy when the time comes.
How many more years of production on the current contract do you guys have? I mean, at what point, if the Navy decides that it doesn't want to pursue the current LCS track that it's on, whether the kind of split buy on the 26th, at what point do you guys start to run out of work to do on the program?
Right, so you may have been following the FY17 contract. We were awarded LCS 28 and LCS 30. We haven't started construction on those yet. We're in the process of finalizing design on 28. That'll be done in the June-July timeframe. We'll start construction. LCS 30 is not scheduled to start construction until December or January later this year. So then 3 years from there is when those ships line up. The FY18 budget hasn't yet hit the streets. We expect there to be 3 ships in a budget. That's what we're asking for. And then we expect to win 2 of those. So every time we're awarded a ship that increases the length of the production line another 3 years, obviously you need starts to keep the production line hot, right? So 28 is critical for us to maintain the industrial base. 30, critical. Likewise, the awards for 32 and follow is something we're watching very closely.
And on continuing resolutions, I mean, that's what life has been under. What kind of impact has that had on guys like you who are waiting for those kind of contracts to basically get worked on? What kind of impact has life under continuing resolutions had on you guys?
So it provides uncertainty, right? You never really know, are you going to have a follow-through on some of the promises that have been made? We have not been impacted particularly yet in the LCS program, but anybody looking to come work for Austal, anybody looking to retain work at Austal is always looking for, do I have a long-term play here? Continuing resolution just adds more complexity to the discussion about whether I want to make Austal a job or a career.
The Lockheed team, Lockheed Fincantieri team, has scored their first international order in the form of Saudi Arabia's LCS. Where are you guys marketing it? You know, you guys also have talked about some international interest in the ship. Where do you guys see that interest, and how long is it going to be before you know, you guys have something to announce on your part?
Yes, I'll be honest, we're focused on the domestic market. The FFGX for the U.S. Navy is where I spend most of my time. I think as we establish the requirements and come through some of those solutions with the U.S. Navy, you'll see more interest from the international in this design. I think it meets a lot of the needs of other navies, but we haven't seen a lot of interest at this point until we've proven it.
Sir, thanks very much. It's always a treat, and looking forward to getting another update from you over at Surface Navy. And the most important thing is we got to get on your ship and take a look at it.
Come on down. You're welcome anytime. Get underway next week.
Gauntlet is down. Let's see if we can get there. Tim, thanks very much again. Appreciate it.
See you again. All right, my pleasure.